It's Lindsay again from the 30-Day Intuitive Connection Challenge. This is week 3, lesson 3, and it's all about discernment and validation. Now, in week 2, so last week, I wanted you to focus on what was holding you back, what your specific challenges were toward getting your awareness of the fields and the flows around you going again. By giving time and attention to what you needed to release, you might have just made a huge step, or maybe even feel like you leveled up. And if you do, I say congrats, and go with it. It's a huge thing, and it's not something you want to take for granted again. But let's not quite get ahead of ourselves. You should have at least 2 weeks worth of records from this challenge building up. And so today we're going to take a bit of a breather, and we're going to take a look at what you have been receiving. So this week I just want you to kind of hold your energy where it is. You don't need to push forward or ask for more. Now we want to get a little bit deeper into what we have been receiving. And if you look back at those records, which I do want you to do this week, even just to get a general sense of what types of messages you're receiving, patterns in feeling and sensation, so that you can further recognize your own process and further recognize what kind of messenger or what kind of oracle you might actually be. But if you look back at those records, you might notice that Spirit doesn't usually speak to us 100% literally. So no matter how connected we might have felt in that moment, or how detailed the guidance seemed, and so forth, we're always still attempting to translate the message from a 6th or 7th dimension place to our 3D world. And sometimes things just don't translate well. Sometimes there just aren't quite the right words or concepts for what you are receiving, even if you're asking yes or no questions. I frequently get, well, maybe, kind of, it's sort of like that. As much as I get direct yes and no toward any kind of information, sometimes things will not be as straightforward as you would like them to be. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with that guidance. That is simply what the guidance is. We're not looking at the full picture. We can't perceive the full picture. But this is the biggest reason why we need validation and discernment. Now, I'm certainly not the person who's going to tell you not to trust your first gut reaction. But for me, personally, I usually do hold my reaction back when it comes into play, when intuition comes into play. I ask for additional validation as to what I have to tell others, what others might not need to worry about, what I need to worry about, if anything at all, or even how involved I need to be. And it's best to work out some kind of personal validation system that you can stick to, and it's best to do it up front. It's best to do it now while you're still getting the hang of really being connected to your own process and to the flows and the fields around you and to your guides and your guardians. It's developing a language between you and reality, an interface that you can really use to get more clarity and keep to your own boundaries with. I usually use the 3 times repetition rule. So if something or someone independently brings my attention to a message or a situation or a symbol that supports a particular piece of guidance I had already gotten 3 times, 3 independent times, like Monday something happens, Tuesday something happens, and Wednesday something happens from different people or different situations, then I will know it's time to act, or that something needs to happen or be decided. And sometimes I'll put a time limit on it. I'll give it a week, I'll give it 2 weeks, but it really depends on the situation and the guidance involved. It depends on how fast something might need to be acted on. So in a moment, where I'm receiving something on behalf of someone I've just been talking to at lunch. I might know I only have 30 minutes to really try and broach the subject, but I will go much further in my receiving at that point to find out what exactly needs to happen. And that's all that this process is. So but after you've been using this kind of system of validation for a while, that you'll begin to notice patterns of things, of flows, of feelings, of sensations, and this will make discernment easier in time. Now, discernment is a skill that allows you to sense or perceive or know good information from bad information, harmful situations from simply chaotic ones, negative intentions versus positive intentions in people and entities, and so forth. And the greater sense of discernment you have, the more clearly you're going to know how and if you can help a situation or person. Sometimes we just get messages that aren't meant to be shared. Sometimes it is for our ears only. And we do have to take that into consideration while we're receiving. Now, I found it's best to implement an internal ritual around how I even begin to receive this guidance. So once I've gotten a cue, a sensation that I'm getting a psychic hit, I stop what I'm doing. I'll stop the conversation, or at least I'll stop participating. I'll maybe let the other person lead for a little while. But I'll stop what I'm doing, and I'll reach back out to my guides and my guardians, and I'm going to open up this internal dialogue with them. And it might not come in words. If you're not a word person, you might not actually hear it or see it happening. It might be something that you just get a sense of, get a feeling of. And for now, that's enough. For now, you need to follow what you do get. But I open that connection up. Let's go back to that 30-minute lunch situation. Let's say the person across from me needs to know that their mother is really thinking of them. The mother who passed away is really thinking of them and would like them to look to move on in their lives so they're not always grieving. I will stop what I'm doing, and I will go back to my guides and guardians, however that's comfortable for you, of course, and I'll ask them specific things that I need to know in that moment. I'll ask them, is this piece of information true? Not so much because spirits will lie, but because perhaps I didn't get the whole message. Perhaps I got part of the context wrong. And I don't want to also lead into what I might have picked up empathically, so from somebody else's emotions, versus what the true message really is. So asking what's true kind of covers a lot of situations, and it's going to give you more information that you need. Another question I'll ask is, will talking about it with the person change anything? Maybe they just need to be told, and maybe there's no change expected. I at least need to know how to gauge my own reaction, so I'm not proselytizing, so I'm not trying to convince this person of one thing when all that was needed was a simple validation of what I did receive. Another question I'll ask is, what does this person or situation really need? So I got this message. The mother wants to pass a message along to her daughter. But what does the person or situation really need? Does she really need to know? Does she need that validation that her mother's with her? Maybe she doesn't really. Maybe she needs to be validated that she is also receiving that same information. Maybe that was the point behind the message. It's not always literal. And one of the other questions I'll ask that I found very valuable is, do you need me to do something about this or with this information? Because sometimes it is just a for your ears only kind of situation. Perhaps that person simply isn't ready to hear the message. Perhaps it's something they're going to need to find out on their own. And you can't be the judge of that. Spirit needs to be the judge of that. It's good to record it for yourself. It's good to record how that message came about in your own consciousness. But it's also good to know your limits and your boundaries with it. So once you have a good understanding about what's needed for you in that moment, you can also then ask for something like the 3 times validation, if there's time to wait. Or I simply thank my guides and pull my connection back somewhat. Not all situations are quite that quick and clean and clear. Sometimes I'll have to keep that connection open with my guides and my guardians and how I'm receiving the information from the flows, so that I can go back and forth, so that I can have that dialogue to see if the message is actually matching what the situation in front of me is doing. That way I am not just serving as the channel for the message. I'm also involving the other person in their own spiritual experience. And I tend to find that to be the most effective way to do it, because if they're not going to be ready for it, there's no way you can convince them of it. Either they will go into this experience with you, or you can at least plant a seed and let it sit and grow for another time. But it's just simply not always the case that everything we have, everything we receive, will need to be shared or expressed or even come into manifestation on this plane. But even if I have to do this over an extended period of time, keeping that dialogue open, you still really need to have that ritual of opening, of asking, and then of thanking. So forming that kind of internal ritual for yourself will not only create more ease around you, and you're using your ability to stay open or to stay focused, but it also creates a firm foundation for the best kind of psychic protection you can get, and that's confidence in yourself, confidence in your process, in your relationship with your guides and guardians. And that is the essence of centering, of being a centered individual in their spirituality and in their abilities. And if you do want to learn more about that, you can also go to that web link I gave you last week. I'll put it up again here on the bottom of the screen in a second. But so this week, I want you to focus on the aha section of your records, especially for any insights or revelations you might get about how you work and how your own internal process comes through. And remember to post something on your daily and weekly guidances on the Facebook group. Because by doing this challenge together, by doing those sharings, we're creating a new pattern of energy and intent for each one of our lives and each one involved in this challenge. And we can support that in ourselves, and we can support that for each other by sharing what Spirit is trying to manifest into this world. Now, I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to be part of that. And don't forget, it also keeps you in the running for the challenge prize. But I will see you next week when we wrap up the last week of the 30-day Intuitive Connection Challenge. See you in the Facebook group.